Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Iran's supreme leader warns a US attack would trigger a regional war. The warning comes amid heavy US military deployments in the Gulf. Meanwhile, Iran declares the armies of EU states as terrorist groups after the bloc blacklists the Revolutionary Guards. The move follows Europe's response to Iran's deadliest protest crackdown since 1979. Pakistan says its security forces killed 145 terrorists after coordinated attacks in Balochistan. Officials call it one of the deadliest security flare-ups in years. President Donald Trump says the United States could work a deal out with Cuba. The comments come days after he threatens tariffs on countries supplying Havana with oil. Israel says the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt is reopened for limited passage. Only a restricted number of Gaza residents are allowed to cross. A second woman alleges Jeffrey Epstein sent her to the UK for a sexual encounter with Prince Andrew. Her lawyer says the alleged meeting took place in 2010 at Andrew's residence. At least 31 Palestinians, including 6 children, are killed in Israeli airstrikes across Gaza. It marks one of the deadliest days since the October ceasefire. Slovakia's national security advisor resigns after US files show messages with Jeffrey Epstein. The move follows the release of millions of Epstein-related documents by US authorities. Those are the headlines, and we head into our top story in West Asia. And Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, issued a strong warning saying that any US military action in the region could spark a wider war. Khamenei stressed that Americans often talk about war, aircraft carriers and planes, claiming that all options are on the table, including military force. He warned that if the US strikes, the consequences would spread beyond Iran and affect the entire region. And at the same time, Khamenei addressed that recent anti-government protests inside Iran, describing them as akin to a coup. He said protesters attacked police, government offices and religious sites, and added that the coup attempt was quickly suppressed, ensuring the stability of the Iranian government. Let's listen in.
اینی هم که میبینید گاهی صحبت جنگ میکنن که ما نمیدونم با فلان جور هواپیما با چه میاییم چنین میکنیم. اینم جدید نیست. در گذشته هم آمریکایی‌ها بارها در حرفهای خودشون تهدید میکردن که همه گزینه‌ها روی میز است. همه گزینه‌ها یعنی از جمله گزینه جنگ. این همیشه میگفتن دیگه. همه گزینه‌ها روی میز. حالا این آقا هم همینطور مرتباً ادعا میکنه ولی ما ناو آوردیم و چه کردیم. به نظر من ملت ایران رو از این چیزا نباید ترسوند. ملت ایران تحت تأثیر این حرفا قرار نمیگیره. از برخورد حق نمیهراسه. ما شروع کننده نیستیم. ما به کسی ظلم نمیخوایم بکنیم. به کشوری حمله نمیخوایم بکنیم. اما در مقابل اون کسی که طمع داشته باشه حمله بخواد بکنه، اذیت بکنه، ملت ایران مشت محکمی به او خواهد زد.
Iran's supreme leader there signaling that any direct US strike on Iran would cause a wider implications for the Middle East. Joining us now is Sol Sadker, a political commentator, to discuss this further. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Sol, thank you very much for joining us. Given that Iran has said that Israel and other US bases in the Middle East will be a legitimate target if the United States does strike Iran, Is the Ayatollah wrong in claiming that this will indeed spark a much wider regional conflict if Donald Trump does decide to take military action on Tehran?
I've no doubt at all, Thomas, that they would absolutely love to start a regional war. They have, after all, been building up proxies for that exact purpose for 40 years. But as we've seen over the past 2 years, those proxies have largely failed to perform. They cannot stand against the might and precision of Western weapons. They have been digging, for example, large networks of tunnels that they use to hide their missiles. And yet those tunnel systems are only as good and as well hidden as their entrances. Apart from anything else, they're completely infiltrated in every level by Western spies. They really have no way to create such a regional war. The desire to have a regional war needs to be met with the ability. They certainly may have the desire, but the ability is not there. And if I was them, I certainly wouldn't be going around saber-rattling when Donald Trump is in the White House. I don't think he will take too kindly to that. And if anything, it will just encourage him to attack them more.
So you're saying, Sol, that Iran is not capable today of striking Israel compared to relying on proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and regional militias?
No, I wouldn't go that far. They certainly are capable of striking Israel. We saw over the 12 days of that war in June that they managed to reach Israel with approximately 600 missiles, about 10% of which actually landed. None of them were sufficiently accurate to cause any strategic damage. If they really want to start a war, it's not good enough for them to fire huge missiles, and for every 20 they fire, they will on average kill one civilian. That simply won't do it, because it means if they fire off their entire arsenal of perhaps 2,000 remaining, if they were able to do that, which they probably aren't, because their missiles will largely be destroyed on the ground as they were the first time round, then what are they going to do? They're going to kill 50, 100 Israeli civilians. That's not really a war. That's a tragedy. But that's the end of the Iranian regime. Once those missiles are gone, they really lost their final weapon. There's nothing left for them at that point. So they have to be very careful about using their final weapons. It's really a chess game, and they are really in a very tight spot.
And Saul, Khomeini has called these protests, in which killed about over 6,500 people, some human rights organizations suggest. Do you think Israel sees this growing internal instability inside of Iran as weakening the regime or making it more dangerous?
Well, this is a very good question. First of all, I've heard far higher numbers than 6,500. I've heard up to 40.
We can't confirm it yet, Sol, that's the thing.
But yeah, there are 6,500 that are confirmed with names, but certainly there are far more than that. But the main issue is, yes, so on the one hand, they are weakened, they're severely weakened. They don't have control of their own population. They are infiltrated in every level with spies, and satellites and drones are monitoring their every move from above. They don't have control of their own airspace, and they haven't for 8 months. So they're very, very weak. But at the same time, when someone is very, very weak, they become essentially a cornered bear, and a cornered bear can be very dangerous. And the question is that if the Iranian regime are under the impression that their regime is about to fall, will they throw everything they have at their enemies? Some kind of final battle. We know that they probably have stockpiles remaining from the Iran-Iraq war of chemical weapons. This would be a horrifying escalation to see such a thing happen.
And
my guess is...
Yeah, sorry. Apologies for interruption. We saw the supreme leader there speaking in front of a huge crowd, of course, as per usual. Do you think he's speaking more to Washington, to Israel, or his own domestic audience here? Of course, only subject to state media in these times.
It's a good question. My guess is that he's primarily speaking to his own people. He wants to give them an impression of bluster, to give the people encouragement that really they have the upper hand against America. If he is speaking, if he thinks he's speaking to the Americans, then he's really completely out of touch. So probably he's well aware that he's speaking to the people. He's well aware that he knows that the Americans know that that his regime is incredibly weak. So it can't really be for the Americans, unless the other possibility is, of course, that he simply is not in touch with the reality on the ground, that he is surrounded by yes men who are feeding him false information about his personal strength.
Okay, Sol, thank you very much for joining us. Do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And we turn over to further news from West Asia. And Doctors Without Borders, also known as Médecins Sans Frontières, will be banned from working in Gaza by the end of February. This comes after the MSF failed to provide a list of its local employees, which Israel requires for security and transparency in humanitarian operations. The ban has also impacted 37 other international NGOs that didn't meet new Israeli regulations introduced in March 2025. These rules demand that NGOs submit detailed employee information, including passports and ID numbers. While MSF initially agreed to provide the list, they later refused, leading to Israel's decision. The Diaspora Affairs Ministry is now looking into other ways to continue medical aid in Gaza. Next, we turn to Europe, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced a new round of trilateral talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. The meetings are set to take place in Abu Dhabi once again on February the 4th and the 5th. Zelensky says Ukraine is ready for a substantive discussion and hopes the talks will bring the countries closer to a real and dignified end to the war. He emphasized that Kyiv is committed to meaningful negotiations and wants concrete results. Zelensky highlighted that Ukraine's negotiating team has already prepared reports ahead of the Abu Dhabi meetings, signaling Kyiv's readiness to engage directly in the peace process. The announcement comes as violence continues in Ukraine. Authorities report that an overnight Russian strike in Dnipropetrovsk killed 2 people in the city of Dnipro. The strike, carried out by a drone, caused a fire that destroyed a home and damaged nearby houses and a vehicle. Sol Sadka joins us once again. Sol, of course, gearing up for another level of trilateral talks, but this, of course, occurs as violence continues on the ground in Eastern Europe. What do you think can be the hopes from these talks going into Abu Dhabi later on this week?
Of peace coming out of this is the Russian or Ukrainian red lines moving towards each other. And at the moment, that doesn't seem to be happening. And just as we discussed just now with Khomeini, he might be simply being misinformed. The same might be true of Putin. So Putin might be looking at the maps and saying, well, our armies are moving by 10 meters west into Ukraine every day, and eventually, if we continue this for another 10 years, perhaps we will eventually win the war. So it looks like to him that his armies are moving forward on the ground. He might not be aware that the cost in blood and the cost in men, the cost in the future of his youth in his country is so vast that he will never get a return on investment for that. So on the one hand, the Russians are moving forward on the ground. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are moving forward because they are destroying Russia's oil economy slowly, and they are wiping out its military capabilities in a very slow but methodical way. And so because both sides have this sense that they are winning, it's very hard to bring them together to any kind of peace.
Indeed. Sol, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. Of course, when Russia, Ukraine and the United States reconvene in Abu Dhabi, we'll be bringing you all those updates. We move on now, and the Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has unveiled the union budget for 2026 to 27 with a strong focus on infrastructure development, fiscal prudence and tax reforms. Key highlights include an increase in capital expenditure to 12.2 lakh crore rupees, up from 11.2 lakh crore, aimed at driving infrastructure and attracting private investment. Their fiscal deficit has been reduced to 4.3% of GDP, with a long-term target of 50 plus 1% by 2030. The new Income Tax Act 2025 will come into effect in April of 2026, simplifying tax rules and forms to reduce compliance burdens and increase disposable income for the middle class. Additionally, basic customs duties on 17 essential medicines, including cancer treatments, will be exempt, making healthcare more affordable. To boost India's semiconductor industry, the government has allocated 40,000 crore rupees for the India Semiconductor Mission 2.0, which will focus on R&D and chip manufacturing. Moreover, the establishment of rare earth corridors in key states like Odisha and Tamil Nadu will reduce reliance on imported minerals and strengthen domestic supply chains. To promote clean energy, customs duty exemptions for lithium-ion batteries have been extended, lowering costs for electric vehicles and renewable energy. The government has also proposed 7 high-speed rail corridors between major cities aimed at stimulating economic growth. Furthermore, 20,000 rupees crore will be allocated to carbon capture and storage, advancing India's net zero goals. Finally, the budget includes initiatives to promote digital creativity, with AVGC content creator labs to be set up in schools and colleges, fostering India's orange economy. A huge development today, of course, India's budget for the coming fiscal year, where the Indian finance minister has unveiled it for the 2026-2027 fiscal years, with a strong focus on infrastructure development, fiscal prudence and tax reforms. Key highlights include an increase in capital expenditure aimed at driving infrastructure and attracting private investment from foreign countries. A new income tax will come into effect in April of 2026, simplifying tax rules and forms to reduce compliance burdens and increase disposable income for the middle class. Additionally, basic customs duties on 17 essential medicines, including cancer treatments, will be exempt, making healthcare more affordable for the Indian public. To boost India's semiconductor industry, the government has allocated a significant amount of money to that industry to help the domestic semiconductor mission. The establishment of rare earth corridors in key states like Odisha and Tamil Nadu will reduce reliance on imported minerals and strengthen domestic supply chains. Furthermore, to promote clean energy, customs duty exemptions for lithium-ion batteries, they've been extended, lowering costs for electric vehicles and renewable energy. The government has also proposed 7 high-speed rail corridors between major cities, advancing India's net zero goals. And finally, the budget includes initiatives to promote digital creativity, with AVGC content creator labs to be set up in schools and colleges, fostering India's orange economy. So a huge day for India today. It will see what the budget is for the next fiscal year, starting in April, of course. So with a huge emphasis on infrastructure development, fiscal prudence and tax reforms across many sectors. We are hopefully going to be joined by a guest to discuss this in just a second. This is the 7th consecutive budget presented by Nirmala Sitharaman. It continues a familiar pattern: high public investment, controlled deficit and structural reform rather than big welfare splurges. The government is clearly signalling that India wants to remain the world's fastest growing major economy. Macro stability matters more than short-term populism, and manufacturing and strategic autonomy are national priorities. No dramatic gate waves, no tax shocks here. This is a stability budget going into April once again. Now, CAPEX now equals 3.4% of GDP, among the highest ratios India has ever maintained. The money will mainly go to roads, highways, expressways, railways, high-speed rail, urban metro systems, ports and logistics parks, and defence production infrastructure. Joining us now to discuss this is M.K. Agarwal, a senior economist, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's certainly a pleasure to have you on the programme. What are your thoughts on this new budget? Of course, the Finance Secretary's 7th budget presented. What are the shortcomings? What are the pros? And how will investors be looking at this?
Oh, well, I believe that first, let's see its major strengths that are there. And first is that despite so many other geopolitical tensions and global economic instabilities, India has been maintaining its upward trend in terms of its finances and its initiatives for infra development as well as for inclusive and sustainable development, taking care of the climate and environment. So I believe that they are pushing the new sectors. For example, they are pushing the AI sector like anything. And AI is not only for the elite sectors of the economy, rather they are being used for the MSME sector as well as the farm sector. So with regard to shortcomings, there are always shortcomings in a single budget because in India, the budget is presented annually, unlike in many other countries where annual presentation is not there. So what I find that it is a one step forward and it is a type of linking the earlier and having the larger perspective of 2047 vision for developed India. And here let me underline the fact that whatever we are having in our mindset that what type of developed country it should be, definitely it is not going to be the type of American economy. We are going to be inclusive, self-sustaining, Swadeshi, that is enriching our own forces and deriving from our own strengths for our own welfare as well as for global south and other countries. We believe in cooperative federalism within country because we are a federal structure country, along with having a cooperation with other countries around the world that we have demonstrated during Corona period when we supplied vaccine to more than 100 countries. Similarly, we provided food grains to more than 100 countries. With regard to shortcomings, definitely there are shortcomings in the sense that we cannot provide funds to each and every sector in one go. That's why we are maintaining a type of gradualism, but this gradualism is also blended with big push efforts. For example, if we are pushing for the tourism, we are having a different type of tourism. If we are pushing for the MSME, we are linking the MSME with the global trade. For example, we had FTA with EU only this week, and there the role of MSME sector is quite strong. But what we require that the manpower is further skilled, further trained, and they are also fit for the new emerging sector in Indian economy, that is orange economy, and huge investment is going on there since last year 2025. So I believe the manpower skilling is a very critical area that we require, and that's why 5 major universities are to be established sooner as per the budget 26-27 presented by this Modi government. That will provide you can say skilled manpower suitable for industrial development as a workforce along with as an entrepreneur both. So I find that there are shortcomings, no doubt, but these shortcomings are being capitalized by India. For example, we were having some poorer states or laggard states. Now they are transformed like any, for example, Uttar Pradesh is coming fast forward. Jharkhand that went to Davos this time and got a good MOU in terms of investments. So similarly, whatever have been our weaker states earlier, they were, you can say, aspirational states. So now they are also transforming themselves and they are being converted into the new growth engine of the Indian economy. So that's the basic economics, and we are practicing that here. And tax rates are definitely going quite low. And it is a historic low in Indian economy when GST tax rates were brought down last year 2025, towards the end of 2025, and it is giving us a lot of you can say drive to grow further, although there has been some reduced revenue mobilization. But more than that, it is being compensated by increased domestic demand in the Indian economy by the consumers. So I believe that both are fitting into each other. They are complementary to each other, and weaknesses are being converted into the growth momentum.
MK Agarwal, thank you very much for that brilliant explanation. It was a pleasure to have you here on the broadcast to explain that. We now move on over to the US, and SpaceX's CEO Elon Musk has confirmed that SpaceX's efforts to stop Russia's unauthorized use of Starlink have been successful. The move came after Ukraine reported Russian drones were using Starlink to guide their attacks. Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has said that Ukraine is working with SpaceX to address this issue. The Ukrainian minister has stressed the importance of Western technology supporting democratic nations rather than being used for military purposes against civilians. Despite past disagreements with Ukrainian officials, Ukraine continues to rely on Starlink for communications and drone operations. But that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.